So we're talking tillage here. We don't do
no-till.
Yes, the lack of tillage. And so that even includes tilthers, little handheld tilthers that a lot of intensive vegetable farmers are using. And then the third one is being really intensive. So we're constantly growing food for our community and also constantly growing food for the microbial life that's underground. So every bed on our farm will get anywhere from 3 to 8 subsequent crops per year. And when I say crop, I really mean a planting, because sometimes we'll have 2 crops on top of each other, where, for instance, we'll grow a crop of leeks and then we'll grow 1 or maybe 2 lettuce crops. So we'll grow a crop of brassicas, 100% coverage, as you would see it on other producers, plus then another 60 or 70% crop of lettuce at the same time. But I'm calling that one crop. Let's see if they get this in there, because pictures are really wonderful, and we love showing a lot of pictures in our presentations. I'm just going to pause there and say, please, please, please. So having those 3 different aspects, the ecology, the no-till, and the intensivity, are all super, super important and tied in together.
Yay, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
So Paul and I have been on the property for 11 years, and those are our kids. That picture's 2 years old now. They're 7 and 10. One of them is playing a soccer game right now. In Sonoma County. Yeah!
They're both playing soccer games, 2 different games.
The other one's doing it at the end of this presentation. So thank you, Grandma, for... Is that all good?
Yeah.
Can everybody see that from where you are? And we will... How about this side of the room? Do we need to talk? Okay, fantastic. So this is our farm. This is a picture of our farm. Probably about 70% of our fields. It was a late October picture. So this is us going into winter, which is a really wonderful time. We grow year-round. That's really important to us with that intensivity, because you and I, we all eat year-round. And it's important for us to eat year-round. Up in Sonoma County, we're able to do that. It's where Luther Burbank did a lot of his work, and he believed that it was one of the best places to grow fruits and vegetables, one of the best climates. And so, yes, we do it. We do decrease our production in the winter time, just because there are fewer hours of sunlight. A really key time is when you pass the mark, when you have fewer than 10 hours of sunlight per day. And for us, that happens about the beginning of November, and then we'll come out of it the end of January. When you have fewer than 10 hours of sunlight per day, the plants don't have enough UV, enough photosynthesis to do much growth and development. They're primarily able to do just sort of maintenance.
Hold tight and make it through winter.
So we manage that by having our CSA go every other week in the winter, and we reduce the number of markets and we reduce the number of restaurants. But we find that it's really important to go year-round. It also happens to work out really well that people love their winter veggies slightly less than they love their spring, summer, and autumn veggies. So it works out great.
We love winter veggies. So to give you a picture of scale, obviously there's a tractor here, but these front beds, it might feel like more than 2.5 acres, but that front bed is filled 3. The longest bed there is about 120 feet. So even across the whole front of that picture, that's only about 105 feet to here. There's like 15 more feet of the bed. So it really isn't as big as that picture might make it feel. But
and to give you a wait, before you go, to give you a sense of space on how we are, this is a sloped property. We've got a slight slope heading down a hill. We've got a couple of seasonal ponds up here, and then wrapped around our property is a 140-acre conventional vineyard, one of Dutton Ranch's properties.
Oh, joy.
And then about a quarter mile that direction is the Atascadero Creek and the Honeve Creek. So we're in this cold valley bottom in Sonoma County. We're one of the cooler farms there. We spend, I told you we grow year-round, but we spend at least a week with the nights in the low teens. Pretty much every year we've been there, we've hit 10 degrees. So we're not having frosts like, I grew up in Montana, I know what, frost and snow are about, but it definitely does hamper our production. And hence we have the 3 hoop houses there. We have a 4th one in a different field, and we're in the process of building a 5th one for this winter.
Our first killing frost last autumn was September 4th and 5th. And our last killing frost of that same spring of 2016 was June 9th. So our frost-free window was June 9th to September 4th. And that's one of the worst summers that we've had, but it was pretty common. We are usually between May 20th and June 11th as our last frost, and then September 20th as our first frost. That's typical for us in our valley bottom, where our mailbox doesn't get those frosts. Our mailbox has about a 200-day frost-free period. Our fields are actually 110-day frost-free.
When we say killing frost, you're not talking killing the brassicas and the lettuce.
No,
We're talking
but
killing the
tomatoes,
cucurbits
eggplant,
and,
peppers,
yeah, all those
cucurbits,
crops. Well, but then we don't continue to go. Okay, go.
This is a personal favorite quote of mine because there are so many wonderful styles of farming out there. We all have our thing that we look up to, like it's Korean natural farming or biodynamic farming, organic farming, or whatever you want to focus on as your favorite permaculture type of growing thing. And honestly, all of them have great benefits if you do it right, and all of them are really attempting to do the same thing, but they have their own languages for it. And what they're trying to do is create life and enhance life and support life. And what's so great about this quote, and I won't say who it's from yet, this quote, it's a self-reinforcing virtuous cycle. The more life you have, the more the environment can sustain life. So the more life you have, so the more life you get. So it keeps growing. That's just more than regeneration. It's life, it's planet Earth, right? And all of our life goes back to that few inches of topsoil and the biology that's in it, creating that life. So very fast through some of the science, but overall, soil organic matter, which I might change this slide to use different terminology, I love that. But dirt is basically air, water, and mineral. And when you add in the life, you get soil. And that life is the organic matter part of it. And it can be various percentages we'll talk about. But overall, if you just have air, water, and mineral, what you have is a beach or a sand dune. It's the organic matter that gives it the life and turns it into soil, something that's quite usable and necessary. And just to be clear too, we'll talk about soil organic matter or SOM a lot, but there's also soil carbon. Roughly half of soil organic matter is composed of carbon, roughly half. And that's critical to think about because we have too much of that carbon up there, and we've lost almost all the carbon that used to be down there. So historically, USDA stats, historically US ag lands have had 6 to 10% organic matter in the topsoil. Today, our topsoils average 1 to 3%, and plenty of places have only 1/4% or 0.5%. In fact, in November 2 years ago, our CDFA, California Department of Food and Ag, they had the great announcement that we have now come down to an average of 1% organic matter in California ag lands. Yes, we're a desert state, but we're only 1% organic matter. That's our average. And overall, the US had 6 to 10, today 1 to 3, some places far worse than that.
And we produce a lot of the vegetables.
So when a lot of organic producers are talking about building up organic matter, they're talking about going from 2.5 to 2.75%, or from 3 to 3.5%. We need to change the paradigm and think about that. That's where we need to be, back where Mother Nature intended, back where soil health really is key. So this map is UNEP. It's actually a very, very, very old map, and it's not as highly detailed as you can now get, so I need to find some new sources. But the two things about it that are important to me are, one, there's no category for improved lands, and two, everywhere humans exist and farm is degraded. The only undegraded places are the Sahara Desert, the Australian outback, the Amazon rainforest, the peaks of mountains, the tundras, right? If we farm, we destroy. How does that happen? Through tillage. And we've been tilling for 10,000 years. The difference is that we now have 7 billion people and mechanized tillage. We never had that prior to the 1900s. So we could survive on doing crop rotations, which really meant you farm an area, slash and burn, right? You farm an area for 5 years until the topsoil runs out, and you leave that for 30 years, and you go off to do a different 5 years, different 5 years here, different 5 years here, different 5 years. And eventually 30 years later, you come back to farm your grandparents' land. Well, that 5 years on, 30 years off, that's how we managed fertility for 10,000 years. We don't have that capacity anymore because of 7 billion people and limited land. So it comes back to tillage is the reason why we had to have that rest period. What is tillage doing? Tillage is removing, am I in the right order sort of? Tillage is blasting soil in a couple different ways. One of those ways is literally breaking up all the aggregates, shrinking them down, so you have a larger surface area to volume ratio instead of the other way around, and then it's volatilizing a lot of the nitrogen and carbon, which combine with oxygen in the air to form nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide, two of the most potent greenhouse gases. As a farmer, the two things you need most in your soil are nitrogen for plant growth and carbon for for soil structure. And the very act of tillage is removing those and creating greenhouse gas emissions. This is a great quote because looking at our tillage, if you say we've gone from 6 to 10% organic matter down to 1 to 3, and carbon is half of that, then it's pretty clear to see that we've lost 2/3 of global carbon in our soil, in our ag lands. And that has been lost in the past 80 years. We don't have another 80 years of soil carbon left to farm the same way.
Actually, this is not 2/3 of ag land, it's 2/3 of land.
Cultivated soils. It is. And I already jumped ahead, but tillage is one of the ways it does this. So I just mentioned how tillage does it in one way. Let's jump over to the other way that tillage does it. Oh, I'll jump to the other way in a second. So I just mentioned to you how tillage can blow off your nitrogen and carbon. It also just blows off the soil physically itself. This is a great study.
Sorry, you may have to go back and then it'll work for you.
Okay.
There's a great study from the USDA and NRCS from 78 to 82. And you guys can watch that, or you can, there we go. All right. In this study, what I really want to show is the erosion rate. We have 4,700 pounds of soil lost per acre per year on a typical tillage field in Tennessee versus 6 pounds of soil lost per acre per year in a no-till system side by side. They had 4 farms of each type in the same sandy Tennessee hill country, and they had this study over 4 years, and 4,700 pounds of soil loss per acre per year. That comes out to about a 1/14 of an inch, which means you won't ever see it. It's not even visible, but it's leaving your farm every single year, and that's 700 times more soil loss than the equivalent no-till fields doing the same crops in the same soils in the same area. Now, to add to that, this 78 to 82 experiment, or sampling, that 4,700 pounds of soil loss per acre per year, that was half the national average. The national average back then was 9,700 pounds of soil loss per acre per year. So those farm fields were good by national standards. They were good, they only half the erosion rate, and yet they were 700 times more soil loss.
What is it that we just learned right now?
That some farms are still having 50 tons of soil loss.
Certain farms in Iowa are losing 50 tons.
Which I can't even comprehend. So that's just that's just the tillage both blowing off nitrogen and carbon, blowing off soil in general, and then in addition to all that, well, then you've got the loss of the actual loss of physical water. Farmers like this aspect. Tillage dries out their soil so they can work it. So the actual purpose of tilling, one purpose, is to blow off a lot of the excess moisture so you can get the soil dry, so you can farm it, so you can put all the water back in from the deep aquifer.
I remember a couple years ago, we were giving this presentation, and we had a local farmer who was breaking into new fields, a tillage-based farmer, a friend of ours who we talked to a lot, but just doesn't quite go through. And I can't believe it. Remember he was telling you this? It only took me 9 passes. The soil is so amazing. And it was the drought year. And we're going,
and it only took 9 passes to get his sod turned into usable soil for his farming.
How many inches of rain did you just lose?
Back in April when the rains have ended, and now you have no rain coming until October, if even then. Yeah.
That wasn't extraordinary.
In addition to that, you've got the physical loss of life in the soil. So we've lost nutrients, we've lost topsoil, we also are losing life. Not only are you blending up and chopping up earthworms, you're also leaving the soil bare and exposed, so it gets hot, cold, has temperature fluctuations. You're chopping up mycorrhizal fungi and other fungal colonies. You're completely destroying the habitat of all the biology in the soil. This is a quote from the USDA. You don't often find quotes from the USDA like this, and I do love it. Tilling the soil is the equivalent of an earthquake, hurricane, tornado, and forest fire occurring simultaneously to the world of soil organisms. Simply stated, tillage is bad for the soil. No chance you wrote that, did you?
A friend of mine did.
Okay.
We will never tell you.
For the people who don't know, this is Ray Archuleta. He used to work for the USDA and NRCS.
Anyway, to see that in writing from the USDA does make me smile, and we use it constantly because of that. So
because it's true.
You're killing life, you're killing soil, nutrients, etc. Now, it was actually it wasn't soil and oil. It was it was a CalCam presentation.
No, it wasn't. It was at the international.
It was you're right. The International Climate and Ag Summit at Davis about 6 years ago, and they were talking about of all the economic sectors that we have in our society, which economic sector has the greatest capacity to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and at what cost? And what they found through a European and EU study, not US, they didn't want to participate, of course, is that you have far more mitigation potential in kiloton CO2 equivalent for ag at a cheaper cost of euros per ton equivalent than all the other economic sectors' capacity combined. In other words, we've just seen how ag is the problem that created carbon emissions to the atmosphere, and that's part of why ag is the solution. It has more capacity at a cheaper cost to do more carbon sequestration than any other sector of the economy, period. How is that possible? Improved soil management accounts for 89% of that solution. It isn't about livestock and sheep farts. It isn't about rice paddy management and methane releases. 89% of that capacity in ag comes from better soil management. That's the solution right there. I don't like putting all my eggs in one basket, but boy, that's the basket I put them in, right there.
The soil sucks the carbon out of the air.
We'll get there.
Oh, actually, we should just say it now because kind of.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. So, I'm actually going to skip right through that one. And
That was a good one.
Go back.
it is, okay, fine, you all read it already.
He
But
was
this
here
one's,
last
this one's
year.
a
Was it last
wording,
year or the year before?
there's a wording challenge going on here. But really what he's talking about is, if you can build up your organic matter, right, half of that's carbon. And if we can build up planetary organic matter levels by just 2%, well, that's a 1% increase of soil carbon, which would pretty much offset the amount of GHGs we have in the atmosphere that are above 350 parts per million. So we're at 401 or 402 ppm right now. We want to be at 350. That 52,
250.
yeah, we want to be down at 200, et cetera. But if that 52 that we're higher than 350, that 52, if you divided it into all the ag lands of the planet, only equates to about 1% or 2% carbon content increase, which the organic farms out there are not achieving. And they will take a century to not achieve that. Because they're going incrementally 0.25% increase every 10 years. We need to change the paradigm and rethink about how to get back to where Mother Nature intended our soil to be. And then farm within that. And make sure that the farming system keeps it there and promotes it. We'll see.
There's a couple places you can find them online. I'll tell afterwards.
We will.
So we're going to transition now to talking about our farm and how we do it. And can I have the clicker?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We like to use these 4 principles of better soil management because we find that we can talk about it and break it up in an easy to understand way. They also link backwards and around and do flips around each other and so forth and so on. This similar slide's going to come up several times. So
and we usually do combine these into one.
Yeah.
So you'll often hear us say the 3 principles of soil management.
we
Well, that's what we mean. The same 4, but we
But if
combine
we're
them.
really to quote them, there's 4. 1 is disturb the soil as little as possible. Okay, so that's not doing any tillage. The second is grow as many different species of plants as practical. Okay, that's diversity like I mentioned up front. 3, keeping living plants in the soil as often as possible. And 4, keeping the soil covered all the time.
I think they said as often as possible. We changed it all the time.
We forgot one, and I think we got in an argument about it, but it's up in USDA. One we're forgetting that's very critical, there's really 5, is incorporate animals in the system.
All right.
Ah.
5, please do not leave animals out of the system. That changes everything. So
Let's circle back to that at the end during Q&A because we definitely have something to add to that discussion.
Good.
Okay.
And that's a great one. Thank you.
There's really 5 principles.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of discussion, so I just kind of want to let you know
Yeah,
that
please.
really put the animals in the system.
Yeah, good.
Great.
Glad to hear it.
Oh, wait. So number 1, disturb the soil as little as possible. When you have healthy soil, this is a picture one of our farmers, Rose, took this spring when she cut an escarole for a restaurant harvest. Isn't that
That's
phenomenal?
the stem and root
The
of the
stem is
escarole
this
plant
big.
being harvested,
Isn't that
so it's gone. And that's the life that was up against the root structure.
So
of
why
the
don't we
escarole.
want to till that? Tell me. I want to harvest that plant and put the next plant in right away. So this is a picture looking down our property. We've got a couple of our farmers going down with broad forks over our shoulder. The reason is not tilling. I can't really give you, well, we don't till. We'll talk about what we do, but everybody wants a tool. And we don't use this very much, but if you were to have a tool, the broad fork would be the tool to have. We see this as a good transition tool for people who have lower soil organic matter and are moving towards doing no-till vegetable production. It's called a broad fork. There's a lot of different places you can buy it from. We prefer the one from Johnny's. There's several different widths. We use the largest 27-inch, but if you're a backyard gardener and you want a much smaller one, we know some people who have smaller ones and they work well. They are disturbing the soil a little bit. They are aerating a little bit. They are not
lifting.
Turning the soil. If I use this, I used it this last spring. Last winter was pretty harsh on us. About 1/5 of our property went underwater 7 times in an area where we have pretty clay-based soils. That got pretty compacted. So we did do this. We do this on the clay-based part of our property, and it was pretty phenomenal because it felt really hard, but you would get it down in there, fall back, and all these earthworms would come up, peek up, and be like, "Oh, look, no pathways," and go straight back down. You just go, and this do it again. It was really fun.
But in our fields that have been organic matter levels of 6% to 11% for the past 5 or 6 years, those fields haven't seen a broad fork in 15 to 20 crops.
I would actually even say more sometimes.
Tool. It is not a maintenance tool. It's just to help you get away from tillage, no-till, and once you've achieved proper soil, that also goes away, and you don't need them anymore.
So we're going to talk about our bed prep, how we move from one crop to the next in a little bit, but for right now, we don't till. If we do anything, we'll use a broad fork. Grow as many different species of plants as practical. I don't want to grow an acre of broccoli followed by an acre of broccoli followed by an acre of broccoli. I want to grow broccoli intercropped with some lettuce, and after that, let's put in some baby bok choy, and after that, how about some leeks interspersed with something else, and then some fennel, and keep going like that. Beets. So they're beets. They're not going to be taking the same nutrients. They're not going to be giving off the same exudates. They're going to have different microbial communities and so forth. And keep living plants in the soil as often as possible. So that's why we sort of group that together. Keep things in there all the time. And why do we want to do that? This is the answer to, this is why we're all here today, right, at Soil Not Oil. This is the answer. We get this from Christy Jones. What is happening? How are you bringing that CO2 down? First, you're photosynthesizing. What's happening in the leaf when you're photosynthesizing? They're taking the carbon atom off of the CO2. They're using that, what?
From the atmosphere.
From the atmosphere. They're using sunlight and water and photosynthesis to take that carbon and create your most basic carbon building block. Building block, which is glucose, right? Then you're going to take that glucose and you're going to, actually this has a little light, doesn't it? You're going to resynthesize that into a myriad of other carbon-based products, more complicated sugars, carbohydrates, amino acids, proteins, wax, fats, so forth and so on. A huge percentage of that, 40% of that, you're going to not use for your own growth and development if you're that plant, but you are going to push out as an exudate into the soil. You're going to take that carbon from the CO2 in the air and it's going to end up in the soil as a food for the biology that's down there.
Imagine
so that's your exudation, you're exuding it, and then your humification creating your soil. And so this is what you're feeding, right? Initially, you're going to be feeding your fungi and your bacteria, but who are they then feeding? Everybody else, right on up the food chain. So this is what it will look like. And we'll just now start showing you lots of pictures on the, yes. So what do we have here? This picture is about this time of year. About September, we've got the end of some pepper crops. We've got some Brussels sprouts already in. We've got some fennel going down the middle of them. There's a row of eggplant there, and then some sort of brassica it looks like there. I don't know what that is, a little jungly. But lots of things going on at the same time. This is an early spring planting where we did a lot of transitioning all at once. You've got some kales here, some chards there, some brassicas there, and onwards and onwards. So that 3 to 8 sequential economic crops in any 12-month cycle. Again, here we've got some baby bok choy, lettuce interplanted with something else, a red something back there. I just can't remember, this is several years old. So economic crops in any one bed. We get asked frequently, do you do cover crops? We don't do cover crops because we just keep cropping. And so we consider every crop, be it this baby bok choy or this panisse lettuce, as a cover crop. Because what is it doing? It's covering the ground and it's photosynthesizing and pushing exudates in the soil. Now, is it as great of a combination as your best maybe cover crop mix? Maybe not, but the fact is we're just keeping green living healthy plants in there, and before they get too old and they stop, you know, their high level of exudation, we're taking them out and putting the next one in. So we're helping sort of heighten that system.
Who wants a non-economic cover crop? Make them all economic. Keep it going.
I'm going to really save questions to the end, but just if you have a real quick comment or something.
Wondering about these crops, some of them needing more nitrogen. I don't know.
I'll get there.
Well, yeah, we've got a whole presentation. We'll do Q&A at the end.
Okay.
You have to save seeds then.
We'll Q&A at the end.
Actually, Q&A at the end works the best. Keep soil covered all the time. Now, ideally, this is how we want to cover the soil, right? Green living plants. And this is how we want to cover the soil, right? These are our bed ends. We put flowers and bushes broccoli, and things like that. I had one of our employees this year. She grew flowers on the bed ends for doing a wedding for a friend of hers. We just like bringing in the pollinators, having a little bit of diversity, so forth and so on. Again, keeping the soil covered as much as we can. Pathways is something that we're working on. We do have some solutions. I'll talk about that.
But pathways aren't where we're growing the food either, so it's less important, but we still want to.
Well, actually, I'll talk about it now. Sometimes we will actually use a black covering in the pathways. It also helps manage weeds. We'll use a landscape fabric in there. Sometimes we will do a mulch, like a straw mulch. So if you can't have a cover of the soil with a green living plant, the next best thing to me is a mulch, a straw mulch or something like that. And then the third best thing from that is an artificial covering, like a black mulch, right?
Plastic wood chips.
Wood chips would be great, and I would put that in with the straw mulch.
We have to buy them. We can't get them.
On our farm, personally, we don't have that as an easy resource, but absolutely. And I know a couple of farmers who are intensive like us who will put the wood chips down in the pathways for 2 years, really let it decompose, and then they flip it up from the pathways on top of the beds afterwards and use it as their compost.
At that point, the carbon's been decomposed, it's heavily fungal, and you just add it to the beds as a fungally based compost. Perfect.
And last year when we did take down, or 2 years ago when we took down a tree, and it was actually a eucalyptus tree, we had a bunch of mulch.
That one?
Yeah, that one. We had a bunch of mulch, and we put it in a couple of the pathways. We had been concerned about doing that because we were concerned about wherever you have two different areas coming together, you have amazing life and growing the amazing life of weeds there. We did, but it was easy to pull out. So yes, I definitely recommend that. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about pathways is my ideal, and what we do in our larger pathways, which are our roadway, would be to have like a clover cover or a grass cover or something like that. And we did some research, and I actually even talked to Gabe Brown a little bit about this, about what sort of clover we could do in our pathways. And we had so much discussion for about 3 years on our farm. Should we do it? Because it's going to grow up. And if you have a broccoli or something,
the clover's going to want to go in the beds, right? That's the fertility in the water. The clover won't just stay in the paths.
Yeah. So we've been thinking about it and talking to lots of people. We talked to a farmer up in Oregon who's much smaller scale than we are, like a 1/4 acre. She did it, and she had to fashion a tool out of an old broad fork that was basically a guillotine. And she said every
3 weeks.
3 weeks she would have to go along the edge of her beds and just chop
guillotine
and
the clover
chop
back to keep it in the path.
To keep it back. Otherwise,
so she was really upset
cut down on her production.
That choice. And we're glad we never went that way.
I would love to find some way to make something like that work.
What if you mowed it occasionally?
It still creeps sideways horizontally.
And the beds are going to go.
What did she use? Because red clover is very aggressive.
It is.
Certain species are less aggressive.
It was a low.
I don't know. But yes, we still want to try some beds out or pathways. But
something quick, or can I wait till later?
My garden was attacked by grub bandits in the form of massive numbers of raccoons digging for grubs, pulling up the mulch.
We get that occasionally.
And even pulling up starts and so on. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions? You don't have grub bandits?
No, we do. And we just keep our dogs active. Like on the times when we see that happening, or when the deer, we kick the dog outside till late at night and just say, stay out there. All dawn and dusk, get the dog outside. Yeah. And it helps.
Animals like that.
The cats
I'm really
don't
going to
help.
keep
The cats will have a relationship with the raccoons, and I can give them their
it's going to distract this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Keeping the soil covered all the time. So one of the things that's really important on our farm is the use of transplants. And I'm not talking the use of transplants. A lot of farmers will use these seedling trays. We'll get a ton of them. Or this is new YouTube all over the web. And I can't tell you how many people have sent it. Have you seen this? This is great. Where you have this pot thing and then this machine that you have to have this beautifully tilted bed that you walk backwards and it automatically
It's the paper planters on strings, and it puts the whole string down. But look at the soil to do that. The soil is tilth beyond belief. It's just been brutalized and turned into a light powder so that this machine can work. This $1,000 machine with $5 paper planters that are a one-time use only thing. Oh my God, the cost behind this.
Well, plus what I'm getting at is the soil that you have to have in that is tiny. So we really try and grow our transplants. I'm going to go to just a picture to a much larger size. You can see these bok choy up here. Yes. So they're quite large, quite healthy. We give them a little bit of soil to work with, and it's really compost-based soil, compost-based mix, so that when we get in there, look at this bed. This is a lettuce bed. That's got a decent amount of cover.
They're already shading their own roots, and they're pretty substantial. In fact, going back to that bok choy picture, those are 4 weeks in the nursery. Now they're going to be about 4 to 5 weeks in the field and then harvested. Wow. So almost half their life is in the nursery. Well, that makes things easier. Yeah.
Can I do a fast testimonial for you guys? Yeah, when you're up there, her brassica that she told you that she cut, you remember, with all the gorgeous earthworms around it and what have you? In the I mean, you probably wouldn't do this, but in the nursery, she's got like a half-grown, lettuce. I don't know if it was a, romaine or whatever. But in any case, what she did was she just kind of spread it out and kind of pulled it apart, dropped the new one in, and all those guys went and went, we're back.
We put about 1,000 transplants an hour per person is our rate. And there's no machine involved. This is all manual. We use people as our power. We invest in people, not machinery. Forget all those really cool tools that Elliot Coleman sells. They're great tools, but they just cost money. And boy, you can get a lot done with people. And it's much better to invest in people. So transplants are critical. We believe in transplants, and we do almost everything from transplant that we can. Some of the benefits are obviously less time the soil is bare and exposed. If you want to direct seed in that bed, you've got to tilt the crap out of it. Direct seed, wait a week for that seed to germinate, wait 3 more weeks for it to be transplant size. That was 4 weeks from seeding to covering your soil with a transplant sized plant. 4 weeks it was bare and exposed, losing nutrients, losing health, and you had to be watering it, so you're leaching out all your nutrients down into the subsoil levels. And then transplants get a second infusion of nutrients just by the virtue of how we do transplants. When we sow the seed, we're sowing it into a compost mix that is 80% compost and 20% potting soil. The potting soil has the body to hold water, and it has mycorrhizal fungi inoculant, and then the 80% compost has the nutrients. So we can have 20-inch tomato plants in a 6-pack at 12 weeks of age, and they'll be dark green. And then when they get transplanted to the field, they're transplanted into a bed of freshly composted soil, so they have a second infusion of nutrients at 4 weeks of age when they get transplanted to the field, which is great. It's like right in their teenage years, give them another boost of nutrients and get them all the way to maturity. It's perfect. When you have germination rates that are 70%, 80%, 30%, what if that germination rate was 70% out in the field? Do you keep it or do you plow it under and start over? Every farmer has that question, do I keep this or not because the germination rate wasn't 100%? And if it was only 70% and you keep it, well, now your bed is going to grow 30% more weeds and have 30% less production. So all of a sudden you have more work for less money. So maybe you have to plow it under and start over again, which means you just tilt the soil all over again and you have 4 more weeks of bare soil, and it's a never-ending negative cycle. Transplants, 70% germination rate, doesn't matter. You only put the healthy plants in the field. You always have 100% crop cover in your economic space that you're really paying your property taxes for, in your mortgage. If they're in the nursery for a month, that's less time in the field. Less time in the field means less availability to pests, and it means more crops per year. I like that. And then transplants outcompete weed seeds because it's a big healthy transplant and a dinky little weed seed that has to germinate and then grows with compost and then grow and compete against the transplant. So we basically don't weed at our farm. There's very little weeding that happens, and when we clear the bed, that's when the weeds come out, but the weeds are always spindly and lanky, and they were the ones struggling to survive against the healthy crops. So all those crop pictures you saw, those were beds that hadn't been weeded. And those were beds being harvested, and there were basically no weeds in them. All those pictures you just went through.
Actually using less seed than most farmers could see.
Yes, probably. Even though our seed cost is a big one. And do we kick our children out of the house when they're born? Or do we keep them at home for the first quarter of their life? And we nurse them along. It's just sort of a no-brainer. So our transplants, Tim was also we met in Peace Corps in West Africa, and Tim Bean was another fellow volunteer in Peace Corps West Africa with us, and Julie was another volunteer simultaneously. 4 of us were all together in Peace Corps of the Gambia between 98 and 01, and now all 4 of us work on Singing Frogs Farm, our own and manage it. And that's really fun to keep that community going. But big healthy transplants is what I wanted to point out there. The transplants you just saw, and our greenhouse for getting a lot of the tomatoes and eggplants and peppers started in January. And then some summer squash going in 4-inch pots. You need bigger pots and shorter amount of time for cucurbits. Cucurbits take only about 2.5 to 3 weeks in the nursery, and the bigger 4-inch pots have a really healthy root system.
Yeah, we use almost exclusively these 6-packs that you all know.
But the 6-pack is an 1.25 by 1.5 by 1.5 soil block, which means you have a really big root structure, really healthy soil you put in there, and a really big plant on top. So when they tell you, oh, use a sterile soilless potting mix and make sure you sterilize your pots afterwards, well, yes, if you have an unhealthy system ridden with disease, do that. But we don't have that. We don't sterilize our pots, and we don't have to worry about a soilless mix. We just have health and bounty. So this was a cauliflower crop in the morning.
This is February-ish.
Yes, and the cauliflower was harvested for CSA that morning. Then later in the morning when the CSA boxes were done, went back, cleared the cauliflower, put in lettuce. That's what lettuce looks like in hour 1 after transplanting.
So that is the soil cover that you've got.
And then in February. And then this would be similar beds about 3 weeks later. So within 3 weeks, you've got lettuce already doing a great job shading its own roots, shading the soil, increasing soil moisture by protecting the soil, and increasing soil health, and maximizing photosynthesis to maximize root exudates. Meanwhile, the cauliflower is actually this big Romanesque cauliflower. These things are huge plants. You can only do 2 lines, 24-inch spacing in line. And if you transplant out this cauliflower and you look down at your bed, it's like 98% bare soil and there's a little plant every 2 feet. You're like, oh man, what do I do? That's not cool.
And that is even having your larger transplants like this.
So that's why we started doing the multi-cropping. You alternate lettuce, cauliflower, lettuce, cauliflower, lettuce, cauliflower with a single line of lettuce on the middle. Well, guess what? I still have my 100% cauliflower crop, but I also have a 70% cover of a lettuce crop. So I get 1.7 crops out of this bed at the same time, jacking up economic revenue. Meanwhile, the cauliflower is going to give a light wind and sun protection to the lettuce, making lettuce more tender and healthier and happier. And the lettuce is suppressing weeds and keeping higher moisture content, so the cauliflower is happier. And the lettuce comes out just as cauliflower begins to close canopy, then the cauliflower takes over, and a month later you have a second harvest of the cauliflower. So this system, they're mutually benefiting each other, and your bottom line's benefited in your pocketbook.
And there are weeds there, right? Yeah. Are they a problem?
They're irrelevant. And you can see some leftover straw mulch in that pathway from like 2 years earlier or something like that. We also love doing leeks. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of leeks with 3 lines of mini romaine lettuce in between.
That was just transplanted, so that was a picture right after
And
transplant.
then 4 weeks later at mini romaine lettuce harvest, leeks are doing great. We're getting light shade and windbag to lettuce. Bingo. Mini romaine comes out. Guess what happened when that mini romaine was harvested? Another crop of mini romaine went right back in. And we actually put down more compost before so that the leeks got a little bit more compost built up around them, get a little more protection of their stalks, they get a little more white shank on them. You put a second crop of mini romaine in, and the leeks keep growing, and if you're lucky, you put a third crop of mini romaine in, because leeks are a 6-month crop. So you've got thousands of dollars of mini romaine lettuce money coming in before your leeks are ever harvested, but all in the same space at the same time, benefiting each other. No brainer. Other examples, things like escarole and endive on the sides of tomato plants, or lettuces on the sides of tomato plants. Tomatoes take 3 months to go from transplant to first fruit. That 3 months is a long time to wait with bare exposed soil, and you can only do a single line of tomatoes, so put something else in the meantime. Now we're going to get to the transitioning a bed. We're not really talking about how to really start this farm from the beginning, because we only start it once. But you maintain it every day of your life for the rest of your life.
And if you understand this, we can talk about starting
as
at
a Q&A
the end.
part.
So there are a few things that we do basically, and we've got slides for each one of these steps. So again, I'm just going to read over it quickly. Basically, what we're doing is we're clearing, which usually happens at the time of harvest or shortly thereafter, preparing the bed, transplanting, and watering it in, right? And then these steps, I've got slides for each of these. So the first one is clear the beds, cut and pull weeds, and put in the compost pile. So here, Marty, what he's doing, this is a kale crop. I know it's flowering. It looks like it's been in there way too long. For some reason, this kale crop, it's a Siberian kale. It still tasted delicious, so we're like, yeah, we know it's flowering, but we're still going to keep going with it.
Harvest, harvest, harvest.
So,
beautiful. Bees loved it too, of course.
We don't want to pull out those plants. Because once we're pulling out those plants, we're pulling out all the roots for you're basically tilling there, right? And you're taking the most biologically active area and pulling it out. Granted, you're putting it in your compost pile, but you're disturbing it so seriously. So what he's got, oh, oops, I was looking for the pointer. What he's got there is a pair of loppers. We'll either use a harvest knife if it's not got a major stalk, or if it's got a major stalk, we'll use loppers. And we'll go in there. If this is a soil surface, the ideal is to go a little bit below the soil surface and cut it. Okay? So those roots are still working. They are still transferring water and nutrients and so forth and so on. They're not pushing exudates anymore because you've lost the top part, but they're still working for a few days when you're getting ready and putting the new plant in right next door. Okay? So he's chopping it out. He will pull weeds at the time.
We're happy to pull because the weeds tend to have an irrelevant root structure because the weeds were competing anyway, so they were irrelevant little spindly weeds. And weed roots tend to have a more bacterially based rhizosphere, whereas the vegetables tend to be a more fungally based rhizosphere. So we're happy to pull the bacterial roots out, or the weed roots out, because we don't really want to encourage that rhizosphere. Very quickly, but we're doing Q&A at the end, and that'll be a lot easier.
They are weeds, and we are farmers, so I am trying to focus more on this crop than on the weed crop. So, then this is just only as needed, and it happens very rarely on our farms, lifting the pathways. So I was talking about the farmer in Quebec who has the mulch and then he puts it up onto his beds. Same thing we do on our farm is every once in a while we will scoop out the pathways and put it up on top of the beds.
There's just a lot of beautiful organic matter that's built up there.
Yeah, if that is the case, we do need a pretty level bed top, so we will rake very basically the top of the bed.
Raking is like tilting, right? Raking is just one more version of tilting, but with a metal rake instead of a DeWalt tilter from Johnny's. And we only do the raking out or the path lifting maybe once every 2 years per bed.
Yes.
So there's really 5 or 15 crops happening between the lifting or the raking out. Mostly we just keep the beds without this input.
And broad forking if you're going to need to do that. Then we're going to apply organic fertilizers and compost as needed. So we're going to do this about 85% of the time. If we had a heavy feeder, we're going to have a heavy feeder. If it was in there for a long time, and this is most of the time, then we will add these. If you've got a quick crop, you're taking out some Asian greens and you're putting in a lettuce, you don't need to add anything. Just cut it out and put the next crop in. And we'll especially do that in our hoop houses in the winter time. But these beds had overwintering something, I don't remember, this was this past spring.
It was overwintered brassica heading into tomatoes. So it just had a 6-month brassica followed by a 6-month tomato crop.
Okay. The organic fertilizers that we use, one is a nitrogen base and it's pelletized feather meal.
Organic.
I hate NPK, but it's a 1200. And the reason we use that is because if we were to use enough compost to get all of our nitrogen needs met, we would have way too much of phosphorus and potassium. And again, I don't like thinking in terms of those things specifically, but for our constant cropping, we just need a little bit extra. And then the other one we use is a calcium, and we will use a oyster shell that's ground up. So we're also getting a couple other micronutrients from the ocean. We see that as a more renewable source than something that is mined. And we need that for our soil based upon our valley bottom and our soil tests. So what you're seeing here is Yvonne and Miguel shoveling the compost on the tops of the beds. And then transplant seedings. And Paul made the slide. He was really cute. He put me next to my daughter. Both of us, it's our favorite thing. So we're transplanting straight from these 6-packs and into the ground.
That's your farm labor?
Yes.
That's why you believe it.
Start them early.
Oh.
We can't keep her out of the fields.
Look, you're famous! Donald! And then watering in the transplants by hand. Some of the new farmers we have on our farm think this is odd, but when we put those new transplants in, we do take the time to water them in, unless we're having rain that evening that we transplant them in, to really get them settled and to get the bed started out. And then cover the crops and cover the beds as needed. We have several different covers that we'll use. We have a really healthy ecosystem. We'll talk about that and hedgerows later, but that promotes all sorts of really wonderful birds. Well, birds, especially in the spring, will go after our brassicas like insane. You can put out a line of broccoli, leave it there for 3 hours, and it's already half pecked. So we'll put a mesh over that. This is in the middle of winter. Oh, sorry. And that's a baby bok choy crop, so Paul is covering it with a frost blanket, or rather checking on it. Here is the bird netting that I was talking about. These were last spring, maybe February,
tulle
March.
fabric, like for wedding decorations.
Tulle.
Yeah, go to Joann's Fabrics and buy the whole bolt, or go online and get 15 bolts.
And you can get it in any color. We're
Pink,
boring, we do
gold,
white.
silver.
But it keeps them off. It also keeps deer off. We had a deer problem this year, so it just keeps the deer off. Some of that ecology that we love. And here sometimes in the winter we'll actually have double covers. Miguel is taking one cover off. Cover beds as needed. One thing that I did talk about a little bit when I said keep your ground covered. Sometimes we will do an artificial cover. What's happening here, this is a middle of the winter shot. Sometimes when we are not able to get a crop in the bed right away, we will artificially cover the beds. This is a technique, it's originally French and it's been made popular by a couple of farmers in the last 5 or so years. It's called occultation. You're occulting the sun. And so you are not photosynthesizing into that, but this picture is in January. You weren't photosynthesizing in there too much anyhow. But what you're doing is you're keeping the soil covered. You're not having any weed growth, so you don't have to take care of that later. You're decomposing the weeds that are there or the crops that were there. You have amazing life when you pull that back up, and you can transplant right back in.
So you're not solarizing either. It's permeable. It allows in
Right.
moisture and allows air, gaseous exchange. And when you peel it back after 4 or 5 weeks, it's like chocolate cake under there. It is gorgeous.
It's really lovely.
It's not plastic, what is it?
It is.
It is a plastic. It's a
It's
woven plastic.
landscape fabric.
It's called landscape fabric.
But you take it out before it breaks down, right?
It lasts.
Oh, it
We've had
lasts
stuff for
years
over
and
a
years.
decade and it looks
We'll
brand new.
use it and use it and use it and use it.
Call Harmony Farm Supply. Ask for part number 48104. That's that stuff.
Some farmers will use what's called silage tarps. That's what's most popular for occulting right now. But that is like, think of your thick contractor garbage bags. It's like that, but you can get the size as 3 times the size of this room.
So that doesn't allow air or water exchange, and it's really heavy to move around. So we think it has some drawbacks, but other farmers really enjoy it.
We can micromanage here, and as you can see, just put it on one bed. So that is one of our ways to cover soil, especially as like you're seeing right here in the dead of winter, when if I take out a Brussels sprout crop for Christmas, I can't put in a major crop at that time because we're at fewer than 10 hours of daylight per day. I could put in a lettuce crop maybe, but then it's sort of cold and that. So I'm gonna cover it and wait until February 1st, wait, and then get something in there and have an early spring crop coming out in that way.
So this is a nice example that we put together a year and a half ago. And actually, John was our main sort of farm foreman at that point, and Karen and Mikey were 2 interns from Israel and Australia. So this was done by one person who knew what he was doing and 2 people who were brand new on the job, like this was their 3rd week or 4th week. And this is 4 beds we're transitioning over. They're 85 feet long each, and the total time lapse you're gonna watch is 45 minutes of time. So you can even check where shadows are, it doesn't move at all. The clouds go overhead, which is pretty cool.
It was a rainy day.
This was a broccoli crop that overwintered, and they were done. And then here was a flowered mustard crop. Actually, possibly, no, it wasn't the one Marty was flipping in.
No, it wasn't. This is a
so there's a flowered mustard that just, it couldn't handle it. We just had like a heat wave at the wrong time, and it was only halfway to maturity, and then boom, went straight to flowering.
And then pretty story, Karen and Mikey now for the last year have had a phenomenal no-till farm outside of Melbourne, Australia.
And when they share their photos on Instagram, it looks like our farm.
We're like,
where'd you take that picture? It's amazing.
It's called Mossy Willow Farm.
They're glowing and they're happy and they're loving it.
Okay, you ready? I'm actually not sure how to make this
go
with this.
Right click.
I'm gonna do this.
Mustard.
Okay, so they're clearing the beds. Over here they're using just a knife, and over here probably more like loppers or something like that. Okay,
and then the irrigation lines come off. There's a calcium, there's the feather meal, 1200 organic. The compost is going on. It's actually, it looks like a lot, but it's about a ½ inch. It was just enough to cover the ferts so you can't see them.
The lines went back, the irrigation lines went back on.
Transplanting starts. We're multi-cropping here. We have cauliflower and lettuce going in together. Coffee break. And back to work.
Run it again.
We will.
Sure.
That's got to be in real time, because you can't do all that in 45 minutes, right?
Yep, that was 45 minutes.
And here we're watering it in.
And done. We'll do it again.
You really want it again? We have a different one also, but.
Oh, good, then, will you? That was just too fast.
We've shown that one before. If you go online to YouTube and look up NOFA, Northeast Organic Farming Association, just type in NOFA, Singing Frogs Farm. We did the keynote there at that Northeast Organic Farming Association conference in Mass this past January, and a lot of this presentation is in that keynote, including this video. So you can watch the video in that keynote from NOFA Singing Frogs Farm on YouTube. It's about halfway in, you'll see this video.
Okay.
Here's the next one.
No, they wanted the same one again. We'll do it
Can I ask
again.
a question about the process, though, since we're on the slide?
Yep.
I'm interested in, like, broccoli has a big, strong root system, and the stalk gets really thick and strong. And one thing, your whole presentation, we're really interested to know how you deal with removing, like, especially a broccoli or a cauliflower.
Well, you just cut it and remove it. What do you mean?
Well, because
Hold on.
the root system's so large, it's
Great, I love that.
easy to just, you know,
I leave
plant
it?
right back over.
Oh, but you end up planting like 2 inches over. We actually had a big fear. We had a big fear that it would be an employee morale issue to transplant into where the root structures were because you jam your fingers into the prior stem. But our crew knows the spacings of all these crops, and they know how to just sort of say, hey, the broccoli was here. Well, I know it's every 18 inches, so great. I'll just move over 2 inches and do the mini remains or whatever it is. So it's very easy to actually go around it and avoid it, and it worked. It was a supposed issue that never materialized. It's much easier than you think. Just try it.
Wait, real quick. Donald, do you have anything to add on this? Donald works on our farm Mondays and Tuesdays.
Yeah, it really, you really don't run into it. I mean, like you said, you just go a couple inches over if you do find that you're going right into where an old root structure was, but we just come through with loppers, cut it a little bit below the soil surface, and you know, you saw the amendments, and then you just plant right into it. And you can stick your whole hand into the bed.
How long does it take for that to keep going before you have to worry about planning, running out of space to transplant that crop?
By the time you're following a smaller, a less heavy feeder, you're not going to put like broccoli back in with broccoli. So by the time that next crop is out, or even the next 2 crops are out,
you're not noticing.
There's so much life in that soil.
It's just been irrelevant. It's just not an issue. And we assumed it was for years, and it's not. And you're assuming it is too, and it's not. That's all I can really say.
One of the other questions that we get often is, aren't you going to have grow back? Like you chop a crop, isn't it going to grow back? And we have 2 crops that grow back and are a problem. One is radicchio.
Because it's a weed anyway. It loves growing back always.
And the other one is fennel. We actually right now have a bed of Napa cabbage that has an insane crop of fennel coming through it.
But the second growth of radicchio and fennel are often as good or better than the first crop. So actually you could have broccoli with radicchio coming up and it's like, wow, I get 2 crops again. This is great.
They're selling right now at the farmer's
issue.
market, they're selling baby fennel, which is a regrow from another crop.
Where the Napa cabbage is already most of the way to maturity.
So that is another concern that people have.
We're going to keep moving along. We only have a half hour. Actually, we have less than a half hour. And
is that really?
Yeah,
okay.
we're at 12:35.
So here's another one. We'll just do this one time.
3 people, 2 90-foot beds, 25-minute time lapse. Same idea, but this was a weedier bed. This tatsoi had also bolted in the same heat wave, so they had a little more work to do. All works, clear, ferts, compost. The sheep in the background watching it, they're a very social sheep.
What was the white before?
And it ends up being about
That's the calcium oyster shell.
It's about 3 wheelbarrows per 90-foot bed, to give you an idea. So when you put it out, it's like ½ inch or less. It's only 3 wheelbarrows per 90-foot bed is roughly. And therefore you can get your own tons per acre calculations if you want to from what I just said. And of course we make about half the compost needs. The other half we buy in.
Why do we buy? Okay.
We'll get to compost later.
Okay, great. So the soil and the carbon and biology from this crop is going to help these plants thrive. That's sort of the underlying what's going on there. Okay. Grow economic cover crops year round. We already talked about this. This is a winter shot on our farm. Another winter shot on our farm. This is a Brussels sprout plant.
Yeah, and next picture.
Yeah.
Notice what our children are wearing to harvest eggplants and peppers. Wool hats and winter jackets. We're cold. We're cold.
Ecology. Should we talk about ecology just a little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah. We love our hedgerows. When we first moved onto our property,
You can intro it, go for it.
I'm going to intro it and give it to you. When we first moved onto our property, the day we closed escrow, we planted about 50 plants, and that is now our most mature hedgerow. After that, we got NRCS money to put in 3,000 Sonoma County native pollinator-friendly plants. So we have
perennial
hedgerows.
plants, perennial.
Yes, we have hedgerows, we have clumps, we have areas where we have swales. And since then, we've also put some more fruiting things into our hedgerows. And if I were to redo them, yes, I would go for all those natives, but I would also add more fruiting things. We did a bit of a trip this summer, and we visited a French hedgerows lady, and she also does all sorts of heritage trees, and she had some amazing hedgerows where she had some fruit trees that were pruned up, and then she did a second line of fruit trees underneath that were primarily hazelnut, cherry, and berries, a couple other things.
Grapes,
and then twice a year she would just chop their tops and lay them down so they wouldn't get sunburned. She didn't get much of a crop from the understory, but she got a hedgerow and then a full line of orchard trees that she was able to harvest from. And I was just like, yeah.
More life, right?
I'm sorry, I ran into your space.
Oh, it's all good. We both love ecology. I think the blessing is that we were never trained as farmers. We never went to farming school and never even worked on a farm before we started this. And in fact, the first thing we did, as she said, was the ecology. Close escrow, get the house key, and start planting hedgerows. We don't even know what to do yet. We've never farmed. We've never grown a vegetable. I tried in Baltimore in the apartment in the window box, and they all failed.
No, you had a farm in West Africa.
Sort of. Somebody else had it. I helped them. That was my job, helping other farmers with their ecology. So we've never been farmers. We've been the ecologists first and foremost. And then we had to figure out how to farm on top of that. So actually, we started out by going, oh God, we got to farm. Well, I guess we should do it organically. Let's get all this tillage equipment that the prior owners left us, and let's till it. And within the first 2 years of doing standard organic tillage, our soil turned into crap. And by June, it would be a brick of concrete cracking everywhere and no life. We're like, what the hell's going on? This is organic agriculture. Isn't this supposed to be healthy and good? And it was destroying our soil. And therefore, it wasn't helping the ecology, which is what I cared about. The ecology has so much positive impact in our world and our farm. So here's a hedgerow that's young, about 2-3 years old.
Actually, it's the same one. This is just 2 years back in a different season.
You can see a field here, access road that we keep covered with grass and clover, and then the hedgerow, and then a little swale, and then our next field right there with a lot of straw mulch, because those were strawberry plants with a red plastic mulch, which was a real tough choice to do, but it works beautifully, and we tried everything else first. I can get into it on Q&A, but this is also a very late summer picture. No, midsummer? No, yeah, it's late summer because of the wheat growth.
You've got also another hedgerow along the fence line.
Well, this roadway hasn't been irrigated since the last rain 3 months prior. Look at the green in that roadway. Donald, how are the roads doing right now at peak dry season?
They are super green and still need to be mowed at that time.
And do we water them?
What's that?
Do we water them?
Not even a little.
Not even a drop. So if you cut your grass too short, the sunlight gets through, bakes the soil. You let your grass grow too tall, it lignifies, the growing head's now up here, you cut it, and the growing head's gone, and the plant dies, and then it dries out and everything else. So you want to keep that grass between about 4 and 5 inches of height, up to about 15, 16 inches of height. That's the maximum perfect area to keep your grass in so that you have it stay greener longer throughout the year. Don't let it get super tall and cut it, and don't mow it short. Mowers can't get high enough to leave healthy grass behind, so I weed whack all these, and I keep them 4 or 5 inches minimum, and it's beautiful out there, so yeah.
Yeah, you look like past the fence line and just everywhere around the county, all of the
bone dry, bare dirt, dead. And then think deeply about this picture. This is Miguel, he's been with us about 5 years, but he is a Oaxacan immigrant laborer holding a snake with a smile on his face. That never happens. When he first came to our farm, he was terrified of snakes, like all of his kinsmen. Absolutely terrified. Wouldn't go 20 feet away from me holding one. He's like, no, Paul, get it away. And we've taught him about what the snake's value is to our farming system. And he's partially in charge of setting gopher traps and mouse traps and bull traps. So he now really understands these snakes.
He actually, a couple weeks ago, we were going into a field that had some old crops in it, and I was talking to him. I'm like, Miguel, could you really set a lot of vole traps down there? Because with the crop that was there, we have a lot of vole problems. And he's like, no, Elizabeth, mis compañeros have been helping me. And I'm like, what are you talking about, your compañeros? What are you talking about? He's like, the last 3 months, every snake I've found, I've put down there because I know that there's a rodent problem. They've done it for me, Elizabeth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's great.
I hope the snakes didn't mind relocation. But
they got a good food source.
He's making his own job easier by knowing what field has the vole problem, what we're going to be planting beets or something into that voles love eating, and getting the snakes there ahead of time for us. And we're no-till, so snakes. So gopher snakes, garter snakes, and yellow striped racers are what we have. Not rattlesnakes, too cold, too wet. Especially too cold.
And that covering that I was showing you, the black covering over beds that we'll sometimes do in the winters, those are actually a really great habitat for snakes. They love going under those. It draws a lot of them, and every spring when we pull them off, almost every bed has one snake underneath of it.
This is an unusual garter snake constricting a vole. They don't usually constrict. And then we only knew this was happening because the vole was being eaten. There's the eye of the snake from the backside. So the vole was squeaking out loud like, where's that coming from?
We have a video of it too, but you don't want to show it to anyone. It's gruesome.
And then, of course, singing frogs, farm, praying mantises, lady beetles, all of your beneficials. So hedgerows and perennial native plants, for sure, one major reason we have them is to promote beneficial insects and songbirds and snakes and pest control. Because, of course, hedgerows have been shown, if you think about your pests and your beneficial insects, the predators of those pests, your pests are your aphids and flea beetles, and then you have your predators, the wasps and the praying mantids, etc. Well, like any other pest-prey relationship or pest-predator relationship, the pests have a very short lifespan, lots of young, quick germination rates, and they can live anywhere. Think of cockroaches, mice, rabbits, deer. Your predators have a very long lifespan. They have very few young. They need a stable environment. So UC Santa Cruz research and many other researchers have found your beneficials, your predators, live in hedgerows of perennial plants, and therefore all your pests live in annuals. Now we have the issue that what we grow economically are annuals, vegetables, right? But we minimize the amount of annuals beyond our vegetables. So our roadways certainly are clover and perennial grasses, and we keep them low because if they get tall, they will also be more of a harbor for those pests. So we keep them short, but not too short to dry out soil. And so we do pest management through pushing out annuals and keeping a lot of perennials to really create the beneficial habitat for our pollinators and our pest control.
So this means we can farm without using any sprays of any sort.
No organic sprays,
not
no conventional sprays, not even compost teas, nothing. And I should say on compost tea, since I brought it up, compost teas are awesome, they work, but the point of a compost tea is basically the temporary Band-Aid solution to a poor soil health problem. It isn't changing the root of the problem, it's masking that and giving you a steroid to get to fruition so you can finally have the harvest and get your money back, and now you still have crappy soil. So change your soil management practices. Don't just apply compost tea to get through.
It can be good as you're starting up and trying to figure things out.
Oh, it's good. Compost teas work, but it's not changing the root of the problem entirely.
Hedgerow in winter. This is the first one we planted on the day we closed escrow.
So it has some non-natives in there as well. We're just putting everything we had in the ground. It was easier to manage that way. And here's a hedgerow where 30 feet to the left is a 140-acre conventional vineyard, and 20 feet to the right is a series of swales for erosion catchment and water infiltration, and then 30 more feet over is our fields. And this is all stuff we planted about 8-10 years ago. And another hedgerow, again, near fields.
Does the vineyard use Roundup?
Of course they do. This is a mama turtle. She just dug her hole and she's laying her eggs right in the shoulder of our bed. Don't tell food safety, please. But these turtles love coming out of our ponds and laying their eggs on our fields. And they love the undisturbed soil that they can dig into and put the eggs in shallow and cover them to get warmed by the sun to hatch out. And that little baby we found, it was literally the size of a quarter.
That's a quarter.
Like, oh my, like take a quarter out of your pocket and look at it and picture a full-sized turtle, but that.
You're just walking up the roadway between the fields.
It was cute.
Is it a western pond turtle?
A lot of these are the red-eared pond sliders, western pond turtles, yeah.
Red-eared sliders aren't native.
No, they're not. They're probably western, because it's not a long streak, so yeah.
It doesn't have any red on its head?
No, western pond turtles. That's kind of the ironic part, it's not even a scientist, right? I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, I'm an academic, and I loved Frank Herbert's Dune book. But that was a quote from the Imperial Ecologist. How many books do you know have an ecologist? An Imperial Ecologist is one of the top 7 heroes in the book, right? Life improves the capacity of the environment to sustain life. That quote's relevant no matter who said it. Because it's absolutely true. And it's a self-reinforcing virtuous cycle. Just want to remind you that. I'll let you.
Great. So wrapping up, when we were doing our tillage, this was a picture of one of our fields up here. It doesn't look so wonderful. This was when our soil organic matter was, well, it was actually 2.4 when we started. I would say this is probably lower
Less,
than that.
because I was being tilled.
This picture is now 3 years old or something like that, but our soil organic matter has been 8 to 11%. We went as high as 14% and we let it sort of drop down a little bit. What we found is that they say that agricultural lands used to have soil organic matter of 6 to 10%, and what we're finding is that farming vegetables is really easy when you're in 8 to 11%. Hello, that's really, really similar, and it might be 6% too. Mother Nature knew something. There's something in there that just has a balance of ecology.
We didn't actually like it. It
didn't add anything.
Changed the quality of the soil that it was not a benefit anymore, and we actually brought those beds back down to 11%, and we were much happier. So you can have too much of a good thing, but you want to balance it, but look at what Mother Nature is doing and balance it with that.
Well, can you explain what you mean you didn't like it? What was it too
It's a lot of very subjective analyses things. So
it was too light and fluffy in our...
And friable and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Light fluffy.
I don't know, you'll have to go back into
so
that.
We looked up a lot of stats from the CDFA and other places, but we were just curious, well, how does our farm compare? Because people love to hear great ecological success stories, right? But the problem is there are many ecological success stories that can't make the bottom line work.
And that's part of sustainability.
You can't beat it the next year unless you're a nonprofit. So how many great ecological farms have gone the nonprofit route, right? Because they couldn't make it work financially. And so we looked at all the other vegetable farms in the state, and we looked at the stats from the CDFA, and we found that this is actually, well, so the California Small Diversified Direct Market Veg Farms, like our neighbors and competitors at markets, that 11,000 is the average, but it's not what you need to be sustainable even then. Economic viability is really 14,000 and up. And so we have two great research centers doing organic veg, and they're both meeting that 14,000 threshold per acre per year of sales. This is just sales, not even expenses and all that. We like putting Sonoma County vineyards in there, because people think that you got to have vineyards to make money, and there's no other ag that competes.
That's what they say in our county, at least.
Well, other ag does compete.
Whoa!
So
per acre per year, that's 9 or 10 times what the vineyards are doing next to us. The best vineyards in the county are only doing 17 to 20,000.
that is gross. That is not profit. We are much higher labor than most of the other farms. They are just beating
70% of that goes to our employees.
their soil.
70% to people like Donald and everyone else who make our farm awesome.
So this is our farm. This is from a year ago. And since we have a lot of people who work part-time, like Donald is only Mondays and Tuesdays, we have a couple pictures in a year, not even in either of them. See, we have
It's hard to get everyone together. We have 3 or 4 full-timers, but then like 10 part-timers. So
Yeah.
it's a really fun community and family.
And then some of the other things we've been doing recently, yes, we run a farm. We do workshops. Wow!
Hey, Mike.
That's cool. Here's Mike here in the front corner. We do workshops. We started doing this a couple of years ago. We did one yesterday. We'll do an all-day intensive where we have you watch a video of a presentation like this beforehand, and then we sort of hit the ground running with how do you do this? Okay, let's walk around the farm and look at examples of it, and then let's do some transplanting, and let's do some bed clearing,
bed prep, transplanting. You do the whole thing all the way to watering, and like the video you saw, you do the whole thing in our workshop.
And then lots of discussion and questions and answers.
And
so we did one yesterday. We have 2 more this autumn. One is on September 19th, and one is on October 2nd. Go to our website, go to our Facebook, go to our Instagram, get on our email list, and you'll figure it out. Okay, enough self-promotion. But just, no, not self-promotion. It's just a great way to come out and learn. We've tried to figure out how to get other farmers to do that. And every time we have it, I would say about 1/3 of the people there are actual farmers. Maybe 1/3 are gardeners, and 1/3 are people who want to become farmers or who are running nonprofits or something like that. So that's really great. We do have scholarships for people who are real, true farmers and so forth. But anyway, this is Nina. She's been on our farm for almost 4 years. And again, just to bring it back to those tenets, the 3 things that really help bring it all together for us. And we feel that all 3 of those are super important: being ecological, being no-till, and being intensive. And I think that's it. Oh, these are other farms who have replicated and are doing it.
A small sampling of many other farms globally.
Oh, oops. Woven Roots has been doing it on their own, in their own way. They have not necessarily copied from us, but we share and copy. They're out in Massachusetts. Nye Ranch is up in Mendocino. Tough is down in Fresno. Handlebar is in our community, as is Red H. Mossy Willow is the one that's in Melbourne, Australia. These two are in Colorado, in Carbondale,
like 7,000 feet.
and someplace else. Hillview is here in Auburn. They've been doing it for 5 years.
About 3,000
Really
feet.
interesting how they've been doing, and 10 Mothers is in North Carolina. So,
Hillview
and
Farms.
These are some of their pictures of their farms.
We go back one. So that was Durango, Colorado, 7,000 feet, getting ready for his winter CSA.
Whoa.
And he pulled a year-round winter CSA in Durango, Colorado, which that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. This is Auburn. This is Handlebar in our community. Oh, and that's them.
you.
Yes. Super. Thank you guys so much.
So, one statement before questions. It is 7 minutes till 1. Lunch is from 1 to 1:50, and that's it. I don't know if they're serving or if we brought our own, whatever.
I know everything's been going
We
late.
don't have to leave for lunch. We're not going to stay till 3 or 4 answering questions, but we're happy to stay for a while. We have 7 minutes more, and then lunch will begin, and you're welcome to stay with us too.
Yeah.
So in the back.
Okay. Thank you very much for
Great to have you.
the presentation. And I'm very much happy to see what you are doing. There was also a time I had time to visit your farm. It's very wonderful what I saw. And when you are presenting, when you are speaking here, I heard something about heavy feeders, light feeders, something like that. And I'm so much concerned because back in my country in Kenya, I also deal with farmers and experience the same. And I would like to see where do you get the materials, or how do you get your compost? Where do you get the materials to make your compost? And also, do you consider also the issue of the type of the compost? For example, hot compost, cold, or cold?
Perfect.
Because when I heard you mention something that after harvesting you can add some, depends with the crops, isn't it? You can add, or sometimes you cannot add. Because if you are going to plant the crops, which are going to take long time in the garden, definitely you have to add. But now it depends with the type of the compost that you used. Because we have the compost that maybe you used but has a high amount of living, but others less amount. So I'd like to know about that. And also to know if you also experience the kind of the problem like sim violence. Because I understand that.
That's related.
I understand that when the organic matter goes beyond.
Yeah, well, I'm going to mention so they can be heard here. Yeah. So compost question and quality of compost, importing compost, and then symphylans, which are associated with organic matter, because we have all kinds of organic tillage farms who freak out at the concept that symphylans might move in because they bring their organic matter up. Because what happens? Symphylans come in with this organic matter because they're eating it. Symphylans are a nice soil-borne organism that will wipe out your crop. And we have had symphylans that appear, and symphylans typically don't ever go away. They're almost impossible to get rid of.
SPH.
Or symphylans, SYMPH.
Yeah, okay.
But symphylans tend not to ever leave once you have them, and that's what's scary to farmers.
That's traditionally what you hear. And
we've
usually the
had
answer that you hear, if you look it up online, is till, decrease that soil organic matter so that because that's what they will eat on. But if you look a little bit deeper, you will find things like what eats them are nematodes, various different kinds of nematodes. And so if you can keep that high soil organic matter, but also have a healthy microbiology, you can keep it in check. And that's what we found. We had symphylans in one bed.
Outcrops at 4 different times.
Spring, we've had them more in our hoop houses than anywhere else. And usually, we'll lose half a crop and we'll just keep going and they will go away.
So they don't stick around. We'll have them and they'll be gone a month later.
Is our experience.
What do they look like?
They'll be these tiny little, they make little spiralies.
Little wormy things with a little half hook.
Yeah, and they just sort of, your crop, they will eat the organic matter in the soil, but they'll also eat into your crop, so it'll just sort of melt.
The point is, build up your organic matter. When I go back to talking about this, the organic farmers who till are scared of symphylans because the organic matter increase is going to bring in symphylans, and they are thinking about going from 2.5% to 3% organic matter.
Yeah.
They are not even visualizing the idea of an 8% organic matter or 10 or 12.